Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy today to welcome you to our administration, admin and ops podcast. We love talking about all the work that happens behind the scenes, and whether it's policy, whether it's people, whether it's organizational structures. We love all of that stuff and love to serve churches. So it's a joy to have a special guest on today. Mark Jones is joining us from Edward Connor. Nice to have you with us, Mark.
Good to be here. Thank you, Gavin.
And we're going to firing HR questions, employment questions. Mark's an employment lawyer, and he said, ask whatever we want. So I'm really looking forward to grilling him and finding a little bit about how we can do this whole area of HR and people employment better. And I think it is a challenge for us in churches. Before we get into the topic, let me say a big thank you to Church Suite, our sponsors of the podcast. They are brilliant. And we thank Gavin and the team for kindly getting behind the work of the church office and sponsoring the podcast. This is a great piece of software. If you've not come across Church Suite, let me encourage you to go and check it out. It has a range of tools that as administrators, as pastors, this will make your life a whole lot easier, whether it be managing databases, your communications, your rotas, your groups. It all works in one brilliant package. They're always thinking of new ideas and updating it. There's a whole training section now, which is available for people to get their skills honed and increased. So well done to Gavin and the guys there, and thank you for their partnership with us. Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself then, our listeners. What church do you go to, and how long have you been a lawyer for?
I've been a lawyer for about 28, 29 years, qualified now. Specializing in employment law. That's a bit longer than I've been at my current church. My current church, I've been there for about 20 years.
Okay.
So I sort of reasonable. I probably due a long service medal for that one. And my church is in Surrey. It's an independent church, one that is blessed to be thriving because it teaches scripture well and faithfully.
Brilliant. I love that. And so Edward Connor have got a whole team of people. I say a whole team of people. You've got 3 people working with you on sort of employment law. This is a hot topic. This is a hard area for churches. I know lots of church managers who have to spin lots of plates. So they're dealing with HR, they're dealing with health and safety, they're working with pastors, dealing with programs. You can imagine the whole list of things that grows. And you don't end up being an expert in any of these things, but maybe a little bit, and you also feel like you're always trying to catch up with doing things well. This is a hard area, isn't it, for churches? You exist because we get this wrong.
Yeah, and let me take confessions up. When I started off doing employment law, because originally I had this idea. There's a whole story here. I never really thought about being a lawyer. I got a law degree course I never applied for.
Okay.
Got a job in the solicitor's office I never applied for. So the Lord is sending some sort of message. But I thought, okay, I want to do criminal law, family law. Then the firm I was due to be joining, when I got there, they said, we no longer do criminal law. Family law, they said, we don't now meant to do family law.
Okay.
And I ended up doing lots of different areas. But then when I finished up doing employment law, I thought, this is the area I love. And one of the reasons that I really liked it was because it was relatively simple at the time. The practitioner's manual, it's got to call Harvey, was one volume about that thick. Now, this is going back a few years. Now, Harvey's, it's about sort of a dozen volumes, all double that size. So the law has got, it just exponentially grown. And the problem is, as you recognize, you can't be an expert in all these areas. Indeed, even an employment lawyer can't be an expert in all these areas. There are so many different divisions, which is why you need a team.
Yeah, you need help, don't you, in this area? What are some of the biggest challenges that people are coming to you for supporting? Let's kind of open up that picture of those challenges. What are the phone calls and emails you're getting in? Probably late at night.
Well, I have a pretty decent work-life balance, so I don't get too many late at night. And well, so those I do get, because I wear a few different hats. Tend not to be from churches and Christian organisations. They're a little bit more respectful of the desire for that balance. Fairly typical inquiries would be a church wanted to get the paperwork right.
Okay.
We are wanting to employ somebody new, or somebody is leaving, somebody else is going to be coming in to replace them, and we want to get the paperwork right. What do we do?
Yeah.
So that's talking about things like contracts and how to communicate well, what somebody's expectation is for the role.
Yes.
But within churches, a particular issue is, how is the person coming in? What's their status? Are they going to be an employee? Which is, when you're applying for a job in the secular world, that's normally the deal. You're an employee, or you might be providing services as a consultant or self-employed, but normally it's an employee. Yeah. Within church, there could be roles that are office holders.
Yeah.
Senior minister, senior pastor. The idea that it's a calling job rather than a matter of an earthly contract.
Yeah.
And so helping to churches think through, well, actually, is this an employment relationship? Is it more of an office that a person is holding? How do we make the difference? And then getting the paperwork right. And the other one that crops up a lot is volunteers.
Okay.
People in training.
Okay.
Where churches want to be able to support them, but still want them to be volunteers, and how they can balance the law, which says you can't pay any benefits in kind, remuneration to somebody who's volunteering, with wanting to actually ensure that their welfare is looked out for.
Yeah, those are two things that we get lots of questions from the church office and signposts from your way and other ways. It's so true, isn't it, of getting that, when you employ a pastor, this kind of so I've known some pastors who are self-employed. I know some pastors who are PAYE, and then we have this office holder, and then getting all the details right about housing and allowances and manses, and when you start adding in all those complications, it is really challenging, isn't it? And I think the advice to give, isn't it, is if you are considering appointing somebody into a role, pick up the phone and get some early advice before you start the process, because it's useful to have all the right questions to ask right at the beginning of this process, isn't it? And that's right.
It's easy, to get it right at the beginning. It's often a lot more painful correcting things part way on, because often that's when something's gone wrong, and when the relationship isn't so strong to put things right amicably. So it's definitely try to get things right at the beginning.
Yeah, it is so helpful. It is, and on your website you can purchase employment contracts and sample ones, and you can also you made reference to some getting the right kind of staff handbooks together. Again, you've got both of these on the site. Tell us a little bit about those and how those have developed and people can access them.
Sure. Well, Edward Connor is, the way it came to being, actually, we were wanting to provide something to support churches, Christian organizations, to be able to be sort of cost effective. We wanted them to get access to good quality legal advice with people who actually understood the issues. All the lawyers are Christians, and they get the issues that the church wants to talk about. We speak your language. We'll pray with you through all of these things, but we want to provide a cost-effective solution. We're set up as a charity as well, so we're not about making profit for partners. It's about we pay our staff a wage, a lot of whom work for much less than they would earn elsewhere. And so we try and provide these resources. Now, there are ones on the website that are free to try to help people do. So there's some data protection information on there for free. There's guidance on people employing for the first time. What do we do? Free information. And then we've got things that are a little bit more complex. There is an employment pack, for example, which if a Christian charity is wanting to employ staff, it would give them a contract that meets the law, handbook with about 35 different policies that an employer would be expected to have in place. But these are tailored so that actually they work for a Christian organization, because the issue is that one size doesn't fit all. And people might know somebody who has an employment contract in their own company, want to apply it, or want to they might find a policy on the internet, an equal opportunities policy, want to bring in the church.
Yeah.
Actually, those can cause big issues because
Yeah.
they are not tailored for churches. And yeah, it's a specialist area.
Yes. It is a specialist area and so helpful. And we as a church have been using the staff handbook and the contracts, and they're fantastic. It's a great basis to start. And I enjoyed reading through the handbook. It's probably like 45 pages, but it's so helpful, isn't it? Because what when things go wrong, or people get upset with a certain practice or something that goes wrong in an organization in the church, to have a step-by-step guide of here's what we do, and there's the biblical premise comes through, is so helpful, isn't it? That people can understand, all right, we've gone wrong in this, we've got a disagreement about something, what are the next steps that we need to take? And again, this handbook is just so helpful in taking people through those steps, because these things escalate quite quickly, don't they, in churches? And you've probably been on the end of some of those more extreme cases. Any advice in those areas? So you've got the right documentation in place, but it's the application of it, and then how we use it is an interesting question.
And employment, so much it comes down is down to the law. The law says you have to do, but actually much of it is relational.
Okay.
If two people work together and they get on, they enjoy working together, they don't really worry too much about what the contract says. And you come with a slightly different approach. So you might feel that somebody perhaps spoke to you in an indelicate way. They were a bit uncaring. But if you like that person, your starting point is they're a Christian brother, Christian sister. You're going to perceive it differently. You're going to want to be reconciled.
Yeah.
But in a strained relationship, actually, you can have done everything right.
Yeah.
But if two people are not getting on, if they are seeing things through a negative prism, it doesn't matter how well I treat somebody, they're going to perceive it negatively.
Yeah.
You've got a problem. And that takes time, that takes cost to put right. But it may be because it may be that nothing legally has been done wrong.
Yeah.
So it's getting that. So much of it is staff welfare, making sure people are, looked after, feel valued where they are, they get on with their colleagues.
Yeah.
And the problem is people can be actually the most gifted preachers, for example, the most gifted evangelists.
Yeah.
Doesn't always mean they're the most gifted people managers.
Yeah.
And in fact, my experience tends to be that people with those giftings towards preaching, it tends to mean actually that they're less likely to have the people skills to come alongside and manage somebody. So being able to recognize that and actually have somebody within the church, within the organization, who might have those soft skills, that recognize the need for them, find out who has them, encourage them to use it, equip them, rather than doing everything yourself. Another problem that those in church leadership can fall into. Having somebody you're confident you can delegate to. Because if people get on, if they are truly operating as a family, you're not going to need my help with much.
Yeah, it works, doesn't it? And there's got to be that we talk about kind of the gospel and how much we love the gospel, and we want there to be gospel application, don't we? So, some people are going to turn up some days at work and they're not going to do a great job, and they're sinners and they're broken like the rest of us, and we all have bad days, don't we? But being able to give grace and apply grace to each other and work through things, like you say, on a relational basis, is a massive game changer in this, isn't it? And we've seen lots of churches that these things are a struggle, and they escalate quickly. And you're right, sometimes the wrong person gets involved in something and it can explode. So it's a good checkpoint for someone listening to the podcast. Are you the right person to be implementing some of this? Are you the right person to be supporting staff and just thinking about what ways we can support staff better? It's interesting.
And a counterpoint to that as well is the reason why it's important to have the right person in place is because there's stuff that needs to be fed, filtered up. If somebody's not happy about something, if something is wrong, if somebody is acting abusively, if somebody is misusing their authority, you want somebody to be able to raise that.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got somebody in place with whom they feel comfortable raising it, the situation is going to get worse.
Yeah.
You need to be able to root out that. So whilst we talk about the importance of getting on, being relational, there is a balance being struck between forgiving, understanding, and turning a blind eye to something that is wrong. That is where the wisdom of another person is important to act as a foil and to get some insight in, actually, is this something I need to do something about? And if so, what's the wisest way of raising my concern?
Yeah. That's true. And again, your handbook is great from that. And again, there's biblical principles that just run through it, which go, okay, yeah, go and talk to somebody about it. If they're not listening, go and bring somebody else with you and try and work those things out. And so, yeah, we want that to be that approach. It's so interesting. I had a request last year for a desk tidy policy because somebody in a certain church organization was just horrendously messy, and they didn't, it was clear they just didn't want to have the conversation, say, you are so untidy, sort this out. But we wanted to bring in another policy that would manage the things that we don't necessarily want to say sometimes. And I think I've come across that a little bit, Mark, and you probably have seen similar things.
Yeah, well, I think on the something like that, people have different expectations. So actually, clothing is probably a key area. So what is it? It's maybe a generational thing. I'm in my mid-50s, and obviously I'm not wearing a suit today, and that's something that's been a bit of a change I've had to get used to, because it used to be when you would go and see a lawyer, for example, you'd expect them to be, in their pinstripe or like that. But now, almost actually, if you are dressed like that when you're working from home and people are accessing you through Zoom and Teams, it creates a distance. It actually makes people think there's a them and us, and it makes more difficult the relation. But people coming into a church, different staff, drift different ways depending on their expectations. But having a standard, actually, is a t-shirt, are shorts, are those, what's the message we're trying to send as a church? Is that respectable? But these are difficult things to have a conversation about, because because people need to understand when you're talking about something needs to be done about your desk, something needs to be done about your working practice, your appearance. It's not a professional criticism. We are coming from the perspective of what's our gospel witness. What are we saying?
Yeah, absolutely right.
To be able to approach it as a discussion, though, to be able to say, this is why we want to be able to do something. So on the desk policy, this is our concern. This is why we think it would be good. But let's have your input. What do you think?
Yeah.
People tend to respond better to that engagement than being told what to do. I mean, I'm a contrarian. So as soon as anybody tells me anything, my brain automatically runs I think it's probably why I ended up becoming a lawyer. My brain automatically goes to the opposite argument. My father was the same, and I've inherited it from him. And so actually, if you tell me to do something, pity my wife, my immediate thought was the reasons why I shouldn't be doing it. Actually, there's a perfectly good justification why not doing it is far better than doing it. And so having that discussion, and I can understand why it might be better, and I can then realize actually I'm doing it for a positive reason, not because you're telling me to and I'm resenting it, but because actually I can see how I can support you, how it's beneficial to the church. That's how you get people to change their behavior. And if so much of employment law is actually not about the law. As I say, it is relational, thinking about how are people going to respond. The law might say, you need to have this in your contract. And if your contract is out of date, two ways of approaching it. One, you can write to staff and say, we're changing your contract because of the law. This is now in it. People are often very protective about contracts, and any change unsettles them.
Yes.
So you can do it that way, perfectly lawful. You've got to do it, but you've unsettled people on the way, although you've complied with the law. Doing it much more relationally, saying, this is what we are going to do. These are the reasons why. If you have any concerns, come and let me know. But actually, we think this will be really good for you and for the church because of A, B, and C. They then come along with you, and let's
That's
let's work for me, because I would love to be out of a job one day. I really would.
that's a good aim to have, I guess. Yeah, yeah. But you're right. Every behind every policy and contract and all those things are people, isn't it? And like you say, it makes a great point about it being relational. And we can, in our policy and procedure, we can, explain how we want to work with people and how we want to do that well. And so I like policy and procedure for that point, because someone can here are our expectations. Here's what this is what we expect from you. This is what you can expect from us. While we're on the contract point, then let me fire a couple of questions at you that of things. So I was working with a church who had some older members of staff in an administrative role that had been in post for 30, 40 years. They even had a contract which was amazing, and it went back into the 80s. But nowadays, in some contracts, you see a kind of cutoff point where you get to 67, and your sort of employment sort of ends. And I've seen some contracts like that, and I'm wondering, is that something that should be in there? Is that something that's allowable in there? Because we have got staff who are getting older, and you don't want to performance review them out of a job, because we love them and they're part of our church and they're members of our church. But at the same point, we haven't got a point where we go, right, let's have a conversation. Um, Give us some advice in that area.
The starting point is fixed age retirement is a problem.
Yeah,
It's normally age discrimination to compel somebody to retire at a fixed age.
yeah,
The law changed about 15 years ago in that regard. So actually, no, it was a little bit more than 15 years ago. Now, it's perfectly appropriate to have a conversation with somebody.
yeah,
So, you're approaching state pension age.
mm-hmm.
Do you intend to keep on working? Now, keep us posted what your intentions are, so that we know what's happening on, and we can manage.
Yeah,
And I know how we're going to cope without you. But putting pressure on somebody to leave and retire is, yeah, there are some circumstances you can do it, but you need to be able to objectively justify the age, and that's within a church. I just don't see that being possible. In something like the fire service, where you need to be physically fit, it's a little bit more arguable. So what you can, so if it exists, if the clause is in somebody's contract, if they've got an old contract, that isn't a problem. You haven't got to suddenly redraft it and get rid of it, but don't rely upon it. Okay. What you could do within a contract is you could say historically what your retirement age has been.
Yeah.
So you might say historically our retirement age has been 65, but you would not be compulsory retired at that age.
Yeah.
But if you want to have a discussion with us when you're approaching that age and what your intentions are, please let us know. So you can help people have an understanding about what your expectation is, but it's not a requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I have seen some old contracts that have had, kind of retirement age 67, and it's probably moved as they've done it. And I guess that does give it a point there. But you're saying don't rely on that to see someone finish, and don't put pressure on people to finish. And in those situations, it's quite challenging because the person may want to continue on in that role for as long as they can. And I've known people to continue working into their 70s. And how you steer that, and a senior pastor might want to come in and have a conversation and sort of bulldoze it and say, right, you're finishing tomorrow, and we've got somebody coming in next week. You can picture it, but yeah, how do you move people on then relationally?
The way you handle it is the way you would handle it with anybody else, regardless of age. If somebody is struggling in the job, then you've got to think, why are they struggling? Can we support them? If there's a standard we say they need to meet, why are they not hitting that standard? What can we do to help them meet that standard? If it doesn't matter what we do, if they can't reach it, and perhaps age is a factor in that a person is simply getting a bit slow, a bit more physically infirm. It's a very demanding job. If you've got a cleaning of a church, you don't want the person to suffer injury. They're no longer able to clean the same way. Then you would performance manage, you would go through a process, and ultimately, if the person cannot reach a reasonable standard that you can reasonably require in a reasonable timescale, it is appropriate to dismiss. But coming in one day and saying, I'm not happy about what you've done, and in particular to say, I'm not happy with what you've done, and I think it's because you're getting on a bit. I think you'd be far better off spending time with the grandchildren.
Yeah.
You might well get away with it because I'd like to think that the Christians would be forgiving and loving.
Yeah.
But if they went to a lawyer, that lawyer would be rubbing their hands and
Okay.
wanting to get the church's resources that should be used for gospel ministry,
Yeah. Yeah.
a compensation of the person that you have
Yeah.
wronged in law.
Yeah. And this could be a simple thing that we're talking about that probably happens, a lot. And maybe there are older members in roles who, who were thinking, right, how do I pass this on to the next generation? That maybe there needs be some ongoing input into that culture, that actually we do need to continue to train people up into roles, and while someone stays in a role, it doesn't, it means that we're not moving, and helping our younger generation to take on responsibility for ministry as well. And you do find people that do get stuck in that, but so the law really doesn't give you many options then to do that.
No, there are limited. When the person's employment is ending, there are limited potentially fair reasons for ending their employment. There are some unusual ones. So one is sort of frustration where it's no longer able to be performed. So if a church were to cease, so the contract is no longer able to be performed, or if an employee passes away or is imprisoned, a situation I have had on occasion, the contract can't be performed and therefore it ends. But a dismissal, you're normally looking at illegality, which could be someone's coming over on a visa and their ability to work on that visa ends.
Yeah.
They're able to keep employing them, or a driving role, or they lose their ability to drive.
Yeah.
Redundancy, when there's a reduced requirement to do the job, where there is a conduct issue.
Yeah.
Misconduct, persons has generally made a decision to not honour the terms of their contract.
Yeah.
A capability issue, where their performance is the problem. And then there's one final catch-all, which is something that lawyers love. It's called some other substantial reason. Okay. It's up there with the word reasonable and appropriate, nice and nebulous. Everything anywhere else falls in there. But some other substantial reason could be a restructuring doesn't fall within a redundancy. So let's say a church is growing. We had a part-time administrator, and actually now we need somebody full-time, and we think it needs to be only one person in the role. That's not a redundancy, but you might need to restructure that person. That could fall within some other substantial reason. But you'd have picked up retirement, used to be one of those, and that's no longer there. If it doesn't fall within those criteria, then it wouldn't be a fair reason to dismiss somebody.
Great, mate, that's helpful. And I'm sure if anyone's got any more questions, they can follow that up with us at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk or directly with Mark and Edward Connor. That's useful. You mentioned a little bit about redundancies, and I think that is a typical question that we do get with churches as they are growing, and lots of churches are, and they do restructure, and there are posts that become redundant in a way. So I'm just thinking a lot of churches would have had an office that would have been running, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. People would have come to the church to meet pastors for pastoral appointments and things like that. And all of that seems to happen in coffee shops now, or in other locations, or in homes. So it doesn't happen as much. So the idea of having a church office is less and less becoming. And so the staff in that office and all those changes, if people were thinking that through, and talk me through a little bit about the kind of redundancy process in a situation like that.
Well, a redundancy can occur in a number of situations. One is if the place of work changes.
Yeah.
So there can be just as much demand. In fact, there can be more demand for work, and that means you are relocating to another premise. That all still creates a redundancy. Now, in sort of the process you need to go through, I'll do a quick plug. There is actually a quick guide, a free guide on our website to redundancies generally. There is also a whistles and bells redundancy pack that takes an organization through it explains what it is, gives the letters, scripts for meetings.
Yeah.
So you really are able to go through the process without needing to spend any money on
Yeah.
a lawyer beyond the pat. In general terms, what's required is consultation with the affected individual.
Okay.
You identify somebody's job is at risk of redundancy.
Yeah.
Then consult with them in order to explain the reasons why you believe there's a potential redundancy situation, so they can understand the background.
Yeah.
The second part of the consultation process is them having the chance to make representations. Now they are informed about why you believe there's a redundancy,
Mm-hmm.
about what the alternatives might be, any proposals they may have, any comments they have on your suggestions. So
Yeah.
if you are saying, we think we're going to close our church office and have staff working from home, they would be able to say, I think that's not a great idea because my home circumstances mean I'm going to be constantly disrupted. I'm not going to be as productive. So I think what we could do is we could have a hot desking place. We could hire a bit cheaper than having a dedicated office. We could hot desk, and then I could come in and use that. So they put that alternative forward. And then the third stage of consultation is the employer having considered that and responded to any suggestions. It's normally classically a 3-step process, 3 meetings, potentially more, and it needs to be taken between something like 2 to 4 weeks to be properly consulting and considering.
Yeah.
Or you make a final decision as an employer on the way forward, which would be, is this role redundant? Is this person redundant? Can we find another job for them to do working for us? And an issue that people often fall into is, firstly, they say at the beginning that the person is redundant, and it almost just makes the consultation redundant.
Yeah.
It needs to be understood that actually there's a risk of redundancy. You have a proposal and you want people to have an input into that. The second big thing is people don't recognize that there is a redundancy, and that happens with fixed term contracts.
Okay.
There is a common error within churches that when they engage somebody in a fixed term contract, they think when that contract ends, it just ends.
Mm-hmm.
But if that person has worked for them for at least 2 years, if you don't renew it, normally that's a redundancy. You need to justify the dismissal just like any other dismissal. It's not the contract ends and that's it. And so you may need to do the whole redundancy consultation process around the fixed term contract.
Yeah. And is there likely to cost them some money then for going through that process with the individual in terms of like a 2-year contract? They would have a redundancy payment to make at the end of that potentially?
Yes, somebody who's been employed for at least 2 years, there's entitlement to what's called a statutory redundancy payment that's calculated with reference to age, length of service, and pay.
Yeah.
That's, if you go to the government's got a website where you can just type in those details and it tells you what the payment is going to be.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. Churches might say, well, as part of looking out for somebody, recognize that redundancy is it's not a fault-based dismissal.
Yeah.
They might want to say, we want to provide for you and your family a bit of financial cushion. They may provide an enhanced redundancy payment.
Okay.
There's no hard and fast rule, but you have to pay the statutory payment. You may choose to pay something on top, and what you pay on top, there's a potential to pay it tax-free.
Yeah. And there is a benefit, isn't there, for that individual? Yeah, that's right. And very useful. That's helpful. In the handbook, another question for you. In the handbook, there's lots of policies around, and we've talked about it a little bit, about working from home and doing the right checks, people having an application process, that it's not just a given that people can work from home, that you in the handbook, you've got a process that you take people through. There is some testing, isn't there, in terms of the right equipment and things like that. So this is becoming more and more, isn't it? I mean, when lockdown happened, everyone did work from home, and some have come back and some haven't. But doing the due diligence in these areas, do you want to just speak into that, Mark, for us?
Working from home
Big area, sorry.
Working from home is interesting because I set up myself to be able to work from home about 6 years ago. Very fortunate to have the space to be able to do so, and the equipment to be able to do so, and working with people who were willing for me to work in this slightly odd way. And also working from home suits me.
Okay.
not just a matter of convenience, but my personality. I like working with people in an office, but actually, I don't struggle with a sense of isolation because I still deal with colleagues each day and the same and clients and organizations day in, day out. Their underlying friendships.
Mm.
But working from home, parking for one moment the legal ways of doing it. There are people for whom working from home, they might think it's really good and they're enjoying it, but it's not right for them.
Yeah.
That people do not, there is the sense of isolation.
Mm.
You're missing out on that fellowship with people face to face. And that does have an impact. And you may not realize that it's incremental at first.
Yeah.
I think people's mental health has suffered from working from home in ways that they don't realize, even though they might enjoy working from home. And that manifests itself in other ways. They can be a bit more touchy, a bit more emotional. It strains that working relationship.
Yeah.
That we say is so central to it. But in terms of the legal aspect, how to do it, the home needs to be an appropriate place for it. You need to think about security.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to be using their own equipment,
is
that how do you protect the data within the church members on their own equipment? You need to have an IT policy from people who might be hacked or phishing emails.
Yeah.
If other people are in the house, clean desk policy, you don't want paperwork out that may have really sensitive information on it.
Mm.
And you need to make sure that the environment is appropriate. You can do as a health and safety executive risk assessment you can find online for home working to check that things like the height of the desk, the height of your chair, keyboard angle. And I started having a leg problem about 4 years ago, getting real sharp pains in my left leg. Couldn't think what it was at all. I play a few sports. I thought that's something like that. But actually, it was my desk was slightly wrong.
Okay.
And over a period of time,
it showed itself.
That caused me the physical pain. So I have a different desk now, and the pain has gone away. So actually, these are really important things to be able to. When you're younger, it all seems a certain amount of bureaucracy, red tape. I'm fine. Nothing's ever going to harm you. You might be right, but actually, this is the body the Lord has given you. Look after it.
Yeah.
Check that your workstation is one that is not going, that honors, that honors your body, honors what the Lord has given you, is not going to harm you. So to do these, and churches need to take that seriously, make sure people are doing that. But also working from home, this isolation point, make sure that you are looking out for people's welfare. Yes, you might see them at church every, and a member of the church, but they are also staff. That's a different relationship.
Yeah.
Get together as staff. Are you meeting together, looking at scripture together? Are you praying together? Doing it in 2D is not the same.
Yeah.
I can smile on this screen. It's not the same as being by somebody's side, and then seeing it in three dimensions. It's there is, Paul writes how much he's looking forward to. He writes, but it's how much he's looking forward to greeting people and encourage us to greet each other with a holy kiss. We perhaps need to be a little bit more circumspect. Don't want to get sexual harassment claims, but that physical contact and intimacy, it is really important because you're in gospel mission together. There is someone who wants to derail it, who wants to make you feel isolated. You are on your own. Nobody understands you.
Yeah.
And there is great wisdom. So when somebody is working from home, don't treat them as being out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, that's right. And as you said, there's some different places you can go and get some risk assessments to help you. There's plenty of we issued some people with some stand-up desks that can change heights on desks and things like that. So there's ways and means, and again, isn't it? It's an expression of our care for our staff that we're willing to I'd help them identify that if they are going to work better from home, then that we set them up to do that well. And those who don't, how do we care for them in an office environment in the church? Now, I visit a lot of churches and don't see designated workspaces and people on sofas and and they've gone to the cafe for an hour, and then they're in the hall. And I mean, those things I just look at and think, oh my goodness, how it's kind of a little bit chaotic. There's the same responsibility here, isn't there, to care for people in the workplace and to provide space. What does the law say specifically around that?
The law doesn't actually say you need to provide a dedicated space. There are some areas where the law um, does say, for example, you can't work above a certain temperature.
Okay.
It doesn't have a minimum temperature, but it has a maximum
Okay.
temperature.
Okay, that's interesting.
Provision of male and female toilets, certainly when staff numbers are above a certain level. But in terms of that workspace, there isn't there's no statute that says you have to provide a desk within a church environment, something to work at. But as an employer, there's your contract, the written contract, but there are
Yeah.
also implied terms which include trust and confidence, and you need to act reasonably as an employer.
Mm.
If you are expecting somebody to do their job, but you are not providing them what they need to do the job, you are not acting reasonably.
Yeah.
And some of that may depend upon the individual. So if you have somebody who is very sensitive to noise,
Yes.
making them work within a noisy environment, no. And indeed that could be a disability discrimination issue as well, depending upon what the condition is. So we can make an assumption that everybody is just like me.
Yeah.
So because I'm comfortable in this environment, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Or indeed, the other way around, because I get distracted by all these things, you must do as well. But we have got a generation coming up who are a bit more able to multitask some things without being as distracted, but who have perhaps a lower concentration overall.
Yeah.
So that they will get distracted after a period of time more quickly, but they can perhaps do more than one thing at the same time a bit more easily. So we are different, and this is some of understanding the people where they're coming from, how they are well managed.
Mm-hmm.
Different people respond in different ways. Some people respond to directness.
Yeah.
Some people respond to a bit more fluffiness.
Yeah.
I tend to need direction. I'm not so good at the fluff.
You don't like the fluff.
And so you've got to be prepared to adapt your style.
Yeah.
And so this comes down again to those in leadership, management, realizing that, okay, when I was a lad, this is how it was. It doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody who has been placed under you. You have that responsibility to care for them as the individual with the quirks that the Lord has given them. And you have to be prepared to adapt. And that may mean getting people around you who are equipped to help and manage in a different style from you.
Yeah, that's right. And it's these things are so important, aren't they, to work through. And often it's hard for pastors to pastor people and manage people and the crossover, all of that. And so thinking through these details of who's going to line manage, who's going to care for people, who's going to review things is really important in an organization for church. So do that. Let me ask you one more question then before we run out of time. Caring for our pastors, this is so important to me. And I'm chatting to a guy called Matt Waldock who does gospel coaching, and top guy, and he's often supporting leaders who are at the point of burnout or have burnt out. I often wonder whether we could do a better job on some of the contracts. So I find some leaders who don't get access to conferences because it's not written in a contract. They don't get help with family and relationships, and marriage can be a challenge sometimes for in senior leadership. And I'm also aware of just the working hours that people do and how they go beyond and above to care for their churches. And so we often want to do these things relationally in the past, but you could be sort of 6 or 7 years in, realizing that you need a gospel coach and you need some help with your marriage, some counseling of some kind as a senior leader, but you've got your treasurer is saying, well, we don't have the budget for it. I'm really sorry. So I'd love to see contracts change and reflect and give permission a little bit more for leaders to, you want it to be done relationally, but if they need to, have it in a contract so they can call on it when they do need that help. Mark, give me your thoughts on that. Am I totally off the ball here?
I would love it to be a situation where no contract is needed. I mean, it
Okay.
really it's akin to a marriage. So
Yeah.
yes, we have, the marriage we have a marriage covenant, and we made vows. But the way I am with my wife, the way she is with me, is not because we have, a marriage contract setting up what we're all going to do.
Yeah.
But there is that balance of the authority, respect, love, and submission working together so that nobody is abused within, taken advantage within that relationship.
Yeah.
Within the pastor, yes, the pastor may always be prepared to, I'll do one more thing. I'll pay out of my own pocket to get it done. Their love for the church.
Yeah.
The church has a responsibility to protect the pastor.
Yeah.
That's that love aspect, and it's respect as well.
Yeah.
To make sure that actually you don't need to do that. You sometimes need to protect the pastor from themselves, because they will go to the nth degree and step down.
Yeah.
You sometimes need to protect them from people within the church who believe actually it's your job to provide for me, and I'm just going to take.
Yeah.
The things we can do, some of it is just so simple. Again, like within a marriage. When did we last tell our pastor we love them, we value them, and what they are doing?
Yeah.
When did we last say, actually, I was really challenged by your sermon. This is how you have helped me grow. This is what I'm learning about Christ.
Yeah. Yes.
Through your leadership. Are there things that identify actually what the needs are, and how can you meet them? Is there a financial need? Well, then maybe we can meet that. Is there a time need to spend time with family? Do we have can we help provide a holiday? Can we provide a break? Can we take duties off them?
Yeah.
Rather than piling more on. Actually, the church is a family. My family has got some challenges at the moment. I have elderly family. So we are having to step up and do more, but we do that in love. We want to do it as a family. So step up, take responsibilities away in a loving way, free the person up. They are not just there to do a job.
Yeah.
Actually, we want them to be an example of how to lead a godly life, which is honoring a family, having rest, being able to have time to immerse in the scriptures, because you're not dealing with all the stuff that everybody else expects you to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Yeah, it's good, and I'd love for us not to have contracts, but I'm also aware that so many do exist, and there's so many leaders in situations where they do need help in this area. And I think it starts right at the beginning, where somebody goes and does a preach with a view of going into that role. And there can be this imbalance of power, is that, well, this is how much money we have. So either take the job or not. We don't necessarily think through all the needs. We don't necessarily know the pastor as well as we might do in 5 years' time. So if you are doing a contract right from the start, it would be great to write some of these things in. So, help with kids and marriage. If you need something, the church can help you. If you need something in terms of books, here's a book allowance for you of what we need. We're expecting you to go to 2 or 3 conferences a year to gain fellowship and to have a break. Here's the policy on sabbaticals and breaks and holidays. Churches don't think through all of those things, and maybe they're thinking we can't afford to do all of this. But if you can't afford to do all of this, then don't employ them. Would be mine. And then maybe that's just too much of a sharp black or white. But catch the heart of this is, if you're listening to this and you are going to employ someone, think about these details, build it in, because they may not need to call on it at all, because it may be worked out relationally. But in 5 or 6 years, they may need to, and to be able to have it and call on it is great and useful. And people move on, and we don't review contracts, and you could be in a place for 10, 15 years as a pastor. And we just, those around you have moved on, and we haven't gone back and checked in and see how we're doing. So yeah, I'd love to see that. Mark, write it in your contracts, will you? Add it to it, please. Well, let me thank you, Mark. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for being here. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like to follow up, then please get in touch at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. All right, Mark, thank you for your time, and we'll speak to you again. See you again on the pod.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.